The three armed men thought they had picked an easy target when they walked into First National Bank at 2 p.m. But security guard Michael Torres didn't dive for cover like they expected. Instead, he immediately began implementing tactical response protocols with the precision of someone who had spent 8 years as an Army Special Forces operator, turning what should have been a successful robbery into the criminal's worst nightmare. First National Bank on Maple Street was having what seemed like another typical Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush was over, and the steady stream of customers had settled into the calm rhythm of routine banking. Elderly customers making deposits, small business owners handling transactions, and the occasional young professional stopping by during their break. Michael Torres stood at his usual position near the main entrance, observing the lobby with the kind of relaxed alertness that had made him the most trusted security guard in the bank's history. At 34, he had been working at First National for 3 years, and both customers and staff appreciated his calm, professional presence that made everyone feel safe without being intimidating. To the bank employees, Michael was the reliable guy who helped elderly customers navigate the ATM, assisted with heavy doors, and maintained a quiet authority that diffused tension before it could escalate. His background check had shown military service, but in a community with many veterans, that detail hadn't seemed particularly significant to bank management. To customers, Michael Torres was simply the friendly security guard who greeted them with a smile, knew their names, and always seemed alert but never tense. Parents felt comfortable bringing their children into the bank when Michael was on duty, and business owners trusted him to help with their larger cash transactions. But what none of them knew was that Michael's 8 years of military service hadn't been ordinary infantry duty. He had been a Green Beret, an Army Special Forces operator trained in direct action, hostage rescue, and exactly the kind of tactical response that banks hoped they would never need but should always be prepared for. As Michael made his routine scan of the lobby, he was unconsciously applying situational awareness techniques that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. The positioning of customers, the sight lines to all entrances, the location of potential cover, details that seemed like simple professional vigilance were actually advanced tactical assessment developed through years of high-stakes operations. At exactly 2:17 p.m., 3 men entered First National Bank in a way that immediately triggered every alarm bell in Michael Torres's military-trained instincts. They moved wrong, positioned themselves wrong, and carried themselves like people who weren't there for banking. The first man was tall and nervous, wearing a jacket too heavy for the weather. The second was shorter, with dead eyes that scanned the room like he was memorizing targets rather than looking for a teller. The third man stayed near the entrance, classic Overwatch position for a tactical operation. Michael's hand moved automatically to his radio, but he didn't key it yet. Years of Special Forces training had taught him to gather intelligence before acting, to confirm threats before triggering responses that could escalate situations unnecessarily. But when the tall man pulled a pistol from his jacket and shouted, "Everyone on the ground! This is a robbery!" Michael Torres's assessment phase ended immediately. Most bank security guards are trained to comply with robber demands, activate silent alarms, and wait for police response. The priority is always to minimize risk to civilians, avoid confrontation, and let insurance handle the financial losses. Michael Torres wasn't most bank security guards. The moment the weapon appeared, Michael's 8 years of Special Forces training took over completely. Instead of diving for cover or raising his hands, he began implementing tactical response protocols that would have impressed a SWAT team commander. "Get down! Everyone down!" the lead robber screamed, waving his pistol at terrified customers. But Michael was already moving, positioning himself between the armed criminals and the civilians, while simultaneously keying his radio with a code that most bank security guards wouldn't even know existed. "Control, this is Torres. Code black in progress. 3 armed suspects. Lobby area. Implementing tactical response. What happened next would be analyzed by law enforcement trainers for years afterward. Michael Torres handled the armed robbery using techniques that seemed impossible for civilian bank security to possess. Instead of the standard defensive response, Michael began what Special Forces call controlled aggression, using tactical positioning and psychological pressure to shift the balance of power. "You!" the lead robber shouted, pointing his gun at Michael. "Security! Get down now!" Michael raised his hands in apparent compliance, but every step he took seemed designed to improve his tactical position while appearing to surrender. He was using bank furniture and customer positions to create tactical advantages. "Easy," he said with calm authority. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." The robbers expected panic and compliance. Instead, they encountered someone completely unintimidated who seemed to control the situation despite being outnumbered. "I said get down!" the second robber demanded, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Something about the security guard's response wasn't matching their expectations. Bank employee Sarah Chen was watching what she later described as the most professional crisis management I've ever seen. Michael was implementing advanced tactical response that seemed to come from serious military training. "Listen," Michael told the lead robber, his tone remaining steady. "You've got everyone's attention. What do you need to make this work for everyone?" It was psychological tactics, buying time while positioning for action if negotiation failed. As the robbery continued, Michael was conducting a real-time tactical assessment while maintaining the appearance of cooperation. 3 suspects, 3 weapons visible, customer positions for protective cover, multiple exit routes. Michael was processing information with the systematic precision that had kept him alive through dozens of special operations missions. The lead robber grew increasingly agitated by Michael's calm competence. "Why aren't you scared?" Michael looked at him with an expression that veteran officers would recognize as serious training. "Because I've been in situations like this before," he said simply. As a Green Beret, he'd conducted hostage rescues, handled armed confrontations, and been trained in exactly the kind of crisis negotiation that could de-escalate robberies without bloodshed. "Situations like this?" the robber repeated, confused. "Situations where people with weapons think they control what happens next," Michael explained calmly. "But they don't control everything, and the longer this goes on, the more variables change in ways they can't predict." Bank customer James Wilson, a retired police detective, recognized what was happening. That wasn't bank security training, that was military special operations expertise, he later told investigators. Other customers were beginning to notice something unusual about their security guard's response. Instead of terror, they saw controlled professionalism. Instead of panic, they saw someone who seemed to understand exactly what was happening. At 2:23 p.m., police sirens became audible. The robbers' planned quick strike was becoming a prolonged situation they weren't prepared for. When the lead robber turned toward the entrance to check on approaching police, he made the tactical error Michael had been positioning himself to exploit. Using Special Forces close-quarters combat training, Michael moved with speed and precision that shocked everyone in the lobby. He disarmed the lead robber before the man could react to the threat. The second robber spun toward Michael, raising his weapon, but found himself facing someone trained to handle multiple armed opponents in confined spaces. Michael's response was textbook Special Forces tactical engagement, controlled, efficient, designed to neutralize threats while protecting civilians. Within moments, all 3 robbers were on the ground, disarmed and secured with techniques that would have impressed a SWAT team. No shots fired, no civilians injured, and 3 armed criminals neutralized by someone they'd assumed was just routine bank security. When police tactical units entered 30 seconds later, they found Michael calmly maintaining security over 3 subdued suspects while ensuring traumatized customers received appropriate care. "Sir, what's your background?" SWAT Commander Jennifer Kim asked. Michael looked at her with the same steady composure he'd maintained throughout the incident. "Army Special Forces, 8 years active duty." Commander Kim reviewed the scene. 3 robbers professionally subdued, all civilians safe, tactical response that neutralized a dangerous situation with textbook precision. "Green Beret," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." 2 hours later, bank manager Linda Rodriguez sat in her office, trying to understand what she had witnessed. The attempted robbery should have been a traumatic disaster. Instead, it had been resolved by their security guard using skills that seemed impossible for civilian training. "Michael," she said during the debriefing, "what I saw today, that wasn't standard bank security response." Michael had been dreading this conversation for 3 years. He had chosen bank security work because it seemed like a way to use his protective skills in a low-key environment. After 8 years of high-stakes special operations, he had wanted to serve others without the constant pressure of life-and-death missions. "No, ma'am," he said simply. "It wasn't." "You were Special Forces, real Special Forces." Michael nodded. "Green Beret, Direct Action Specialist, Hostage Rescue, Tactical Response, Crisis Management, 8 years of operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other classified locations." Linda was processing that they'd unknowingly hired one of the Army's most elite tactical specialists. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted to be just a bank security guard. After 8 years of special operations, I wanted to protect people in situations that weren't war zones." As he looked at Linda's expression, part amazement, part gratitude, Michael realized his quiet career was about to become more complicated. "What happened today reminded me that these skills aren't something I can just turn off. And maybe that's not something I should want to turn off." 1 week after the attempted robbery, Michael was called into a meeting that included bank management, regional security division representatives, and FBI Bank Crime Task Force members. "Michael," the regional security director began, "your response has been reviewed by multiple agencies. We'd like to offer you a position as Regional Bank Security Coordinator, overseeing tactical response training for 43 branches." It was a significant promotion that would allow Michael to use his Special Forces training to improve bank security across an entire region, better pay, management responsibility, and the opportunity to implement tactical training that could prevent robberies. But as Michael considered the offer, he thought about what had drawn him to First National. After 8 years of special operations missions, he'd wanted to serve in a way that felt more connected to normal community life. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but I'd like to make a counterproposal. Let me stay at First National as Senior Security Specialist, but also develop training programs that teach these tactical response techniques to bank security personnel throughout the region." "You want to train bank guards to respond like Special Forces operators?" the FBI representative asked. "I want to train them to use awareness and response techniques that could prevent robberies from succeeding while keeping everyone safe," Michael clarified. "The skills that make Special Forces effective, situational awareness, tactical positioning, crisis psychology, those same skills can make bank security much more effective." 6 months later, Michael Torres remained at First National Bank as Senior Security Specialist, but also developed tactical training programs for bank security across the region. On weekends, he taught courses in threat assessment, tactical response, and crisis management to security personnel, helping develop protocols that turned routine security work into sophisticated, protective operations. "Morning, Michael," called teller Sarah Chen as she prepared her station. "Everything look good today?" Same as always, Sarah. Stay aware, trust your instincts, and remember that most people are just here to do their banking safely. As he watched Sarah begin her day with the enhanced security awareness that his training had developed, Michael reflected on how his definition of service had evolved. As a Green Beret, his job had been to neutralize threats and complete tactical missions. Now his job was to help other professionals develop the skills to protect their communities and prevent incidents before they happened. The transition from special operations to bank security hadn't been stepping down from important work. It had been about finding new ways to apply critical skills in service of a different but equally important mission: protecting the everyday financial security that allowed communities to function safely. Today, if you visit First National Bank on Maple Street, you might notice that the security feels different, more professional without being intimidating, more aware without being suspicious, more confident without being aggressive. The security staff move with enhanced awareness, position themselves tactically, and seem to have an intuitive understanding of threat assessment that goes well beyond standard bank security training. They project competence that comes from training developed by someone who understands both banking operations and tactical response. And if you look closely at the senior security specialist who coordinates the daily operations with quiet efficiency, you might see something in his bearing that suggests serious military training. Michael Torres looks like a bank security guard, works as a bank security guard, and serves as a bank security guard. But underneath that civilian role is someone whose experience with tactical operations was developed in some of the world's most demanding special operations missions. Sometimes the most effective protection comes not from the most obvious security measures, but from the most unexpected expertise quietly applied to civilian situations. Bank security might seem like a routine job, but when it's performed by someone with advanced tactical training, it becomes something more. A critical line of defense that protects community financial institutions using skills that most people never realize are there. The Special Forces motto is De Oppresso Liber, to free the oppressed. Michael Torres discovered that this mission doesn't end when you leave the military. It evolves into new forms of service that protect the freedom of ordinary citizens to live their lives safely, knowing that their communities are watched over by guardians whose skills were forged in service to something greater than themselves. What do you think? Have you ever encountered bank security that seemed exceptionally professional and aware? Someone whose presence made you feel safer in ways you couldn't quite explain? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe to the Veteran Chronicles for more stories of dedicated professionals who continue serving their communities with skills developed in service to our nation.